Sana Khan, the program coordinator and your host for today's program. Joining me in this program from PIQC is Mr. Naim Shahzad, facilitator for the technical session, and along with him, Mr. Hassan Kamran, IT team lead, and along with him, Mr. Mubashir, Ms. Zainab Iftikhar, and Ms. Sadafriki. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's start today's event proceedings with the name of Allah, most merciful and most beneficent. With His blessings, we hope that today's program will be useful and beneficial for all of us. Firstly, a warm welcome from the city and people of Lahore. Lahore is one of the beautiful cities of Pakistan, generally known as the heart of the country. Another welcome is from PIQC Institute of Quality, completing its 30th year of leading the modern quality movement in the country. On behalf of PIQC, I warmly welcome all of you. More than 200 participants from Pakistan and abroad have registered for today's program. We hope to see you all in this program. This is the picture of some our participants, students, along with the faculty on a New Year function before the COVID year. PIQC Institute of Quality is Pakistan's leading institute in the field of quality. The vision of PIQC is for Pakistan to be nationally and internationally a hallmark of quality. In this regard, we are working with a mission to develop organizations, professionals, and human talent in quality and excellence through knowledge development, transfer, and application. Alhamdulillah, we have raised significant awareness to quality in the country and have provided professional training and awareness to more than 55,000 persons in the country in various aspects of the consulting, quality management, and standardization, as well as we consulting services to more than 250 organizations over the last 30 years in helping them implement effectively quality excellence programs. Our main activities, including postgraduate and master's program in quality management, HR, industrial, EHS, and HR management. Training and certification programs like Six Sigma, Green Belt, Black Belt, Certified Quality Assurance, Certified Supply Chain Management, corporate workshops, conferences, best practices forum, consulting services, and publication and online courses. Our website provides details about our forthcoming activities and plenty of information on quality, like case studies, papers, for those who want any details, and check out our PIQC website. The Best Practices Forum, BPF, was started by PIQC about 3 years ago. This is another initiative supporting our mission. The forum envisions to promote best practices in which pioneers or leaders are brought together to share the innovative ideas and good practices of their company or country level. This forum is accessible to everyone. In normal situation, it is held physically in Lahore. However, since last year, we are holding this forum online due to the COVID situation. We are very happy to the outcomes of this forum, which is gradually raising the level of commitment of people with quality and excellence. We hope that today's session will be also useful all of you. With this, I like to move over to the technical session and would like to hand over to Mr. Naeem Shahzad, who will introduce Best Practices Forum and our today's guest speaker. He will also hold a QA session at the end. So, Mr. Naeem Shahzad, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Farzana, for all the information given by me, Mohammad Naeem Shahzad. Welcome all of you on behalf of PIQC and team of Best Practices Forum. Our Best Practices Forum was started late in 2018 with a mission to make the members and the participants interact with their peers on enterprise, quality management, HRM, environment, health and safety, and make it an ideal forum for professionals who hold responsibilities in these disciplines. The first Best Practices Forum was about the energy management system, ISO 50,000 watt. Second was about implementation of Lean Six Sigma in a food company. Third Best Practices Forum was about the practices of world-class manufacturing. Fourth was about the supply chain management in a cosmetic factory. Fifth was about the practices of environment, health and safety management in the General Electric International. And the sixth was about the practices and the process of Kaizen and 5S implementation in Honda Car International, Pakistan. Then TQM framework and implementation with the support of vendors in the Indus Motors Limited. The next was about the implementation of Joint Commission International Accreditation Standard in Aga Khan University Hospital. Then the practices of safety in project planning in the Tetra Pak Pakistan Limited. National quality initiatives and best practices by the Saudi Quality Council in Saudi Arabia. Our 11th Best Practices Forum was about the business excellence with Juron Trilogy by the Chief Executive Officer of Juron Institute. Today, we are honored that Dr. Gregory Watson is with us to discuss about the implication of Quality 4.0 for the future of the quality professionals. Dr. Gregory Watson holds PhD degree in industrial engineering. He has been a quality professional for over 40 years and is one of the world's leading experts in this field. He is past president and elected honorary member of International Academy for Quality and the American Society for Quality. He has received over 60 awards for this work in quality, including ASQ Distinguished Service Medal, IQA Founders Medal, European Organization for Quality's Boral Model. He was the first non-Japanese individual to be awarded the William Edwards Deming Medal, the Deming Distinguished Services Award for Promotion and Dissemination for the overseas. He has been named an honorary member of 20 national quality professional societies. Dr. Watson has published 12 books 25 electronic books, and over 700 papers, speeches, and webinars. He lives in southern Helsinki region of the Finland. About the topic, the future age is the age of Industry 4.0, the age of smart machines connected through the Internet of Things. The term Quality 4.0 was introduced in 2016 to describe the effect of Industry 4.0, which will incorporate digital technology into production processes and needs to be understood by everyone engaged in the profession of quality field. The purpose of this lecture is to gain an insight about the impact of Quality 4.0 on the field of quality and quality professionals. Now I request Dr. Gregory Harris Watson to join us and share his experience about this topic. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Naeem. I'm just want to, we should be able to see my screen now, I think. And so,
yes, it's perfect.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to talk about this idea of Quality 4.0, what it means to the future of the quality profession. I have been working in technology, basically computer technology, for my whole career since the 1970s. So in the 1970s, I was in the United States Navy. I was working on artificial applications, or artificial intelligence applications, some of the very first that were ever put into operations. When I left the Navy in 1983, I joined Hewlett Packard, and I learned in depth. So the Navy, I learned about reliability engineering, and Hewlett Packard, I learned in depth about what they were calling just in time. At that particular point in time, it's basically converted into what people call lean today. I also learned about TQM, and I made many trips to Japan, and we created the basic lean and the precursor of Six Sigma within HP at that time. I was recruited from there to Compact Computer, and we were actually redoing all of the HP types of systems. We created our own version of what has become called Six Sigma, but we competed against Motorola, so we couldn't call it that. IBM also competed against Motorola. They had a similar system. They wouldn't call it Six Sigma either, for obvious reasons. You don't want to give thanks to the competition for your quality system, if you will. After that, I joined Xerox, and I was the Vice President of Quality Xerox for copiers and printers worldwide. And again, we had our own system that was called Leadership Through Quality, Managing for Results. When I retired from Xerox after a couple of years, I was sick, and so I started my own consulting company, and I've been consulting ever since that period of time. My first client was HP. And so what they asked me to do was, please look 20 years in the future and tell us what will be the future of quality. And so basically, since that period of time, I've been doing a lot of what you call future studies, trying to understand what are the implications of the technologies that are coming into reality today, and those technologies that we can foresee coming into the future. And so ASQ, the American Society for Quality, did a series of 10 future studies. And for each of those, I wrote the scenarios of the future. The last of those studies was in 2015. And so what I've been doing since that period of time is actually working with this future. And so what we start seeing is that we're going to, I don't know what's happening there, but basically I'm going to keep presenting whatever somebody was asking for control. So please, whoever's requesting control, stop. I'm not going to give control up. I'm going to keep controlling the presentation, okay? So what I want to be able to do is to talk with you about this future of quality, what it means, what are all these technologies happening? What is this thing called Quality 4.0? The term sort of came up from the outside. It wasn't actually part of the language of quality. We never had quality 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0. So it sort of came out of the blue. So what does it mean today, and what are the implications of it? So what I want to do is then begin with thinking back a period of time. So I'm going to go back to 1961. This may seem like a strange place, but in 1961, I was in junior high school. I read a book, Stranger in a Strange Land, and this was very popular. It was about Martians compared to Earthlings and about science fiction and so forth. But in this, the author, Robert Heinlein, fabricated a word, grok. Okay. Now this word grok came into the language of computer systems, which was just happening at that time. And grok was a foreign language, just like computers were a foreign language. 1963, I worked on my first computer, an IBM 360, which was in our high school. And we were the first high school in America to have a computer system. And so we had this sort of special language, which we adopted from Heinlein's book. We were strangers in a strange land, the only one who understood this strange beast called the computer and all of the artificial things happening with it and the magic. And so grok is talking about a level of understanding when you as an observer become part of that thing you're observing. And so programmers became part of the system. And in the state we have blended and merged, we've lost our individuality in that group experience. And so what you start finding out is the people who grok computers. So if you grok it, you understand it so thoroughly that you merge with it and it merges with you. It becomes a part of your thinking. Now, in 1985, Peter T. Lewis, and I was now at Hewlett-Packard, he described the Internet of Things, which today we call IoT. And he says it's the integration of people, processes, and technology with connectable devices and sensors to enable remote monitoring, status of the system, manipulate its operating systems, and the evaluation of the trends of such devices. Now, in 1985, we had not connected computers. There was no Ethernet, if you will. The Ethernet or local area network connections was created in 1987 at Palo Alto Research Center. And what we saw is that at that point in time, the DARPA net, which was connecting defense-related activities, it was all a research system. It hadn't become converted into public use as the internet. And so this was actually very far-sighted thinking in 1985. In 1993 or 1991, actually, it started. But 1993 is where this quotation came from. Mark Wisner. Now here I was at Xerox. I knew Mark, and he coined this phrase, ubiquitous computing. So ubiquitous is one of those words, means it's everywhere. It's embedded in everything we do. And he made this comment, which I really have enjoyed. I've quoted it several times in things I've written. He said, the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are indistinguishable from it. And if you think back to some of the technologies that grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, 1970s, we start finding out that they are now part of everyday life. We no longer think about them. So the fax machine made a big transition in the 1970s when it came out. We could fax a purchase order to a supplier to order parts. Wow, that's cool. We don't have to send letters. We don't have to send purchase orders. We can actually just send it electronically through a telephone line. Well, now we put an attachment on an email. We send it from our mobile phone. The fax machine disappeared. But how did it disappear? It wove itself into the systems that we think about. We no longer think about that. Remember the beeper? We had beepers in the 1980s. Motorola became very popular because of their Bravo pocket pager. It won back some business that the Japanese had won. But you know, that was in 1987 they introduced that. Nobody has a pocket pager today. We send SMS messages, or we send WhatsApp or something else. But we don't use that. We're using social connectivity. And so what we see is technologies over time, they start losing the things that made them so special. They go from exciting quality, as Dr. Kano would say, in quality. They go to competitive quality, where everybody wants to get the new features. So for instance, in 1998, when the first digital mobile phone came out, there was no phone, there was no camera in it. That was all, ooh, maybe we could put a camera in the phone. And those multimedia devices were starting to come out in 1999, 2000, if you will, into research. And then finally, the smartphone started putting it all together. So soon you had in your phone, you had your music, you had your system that would be able to send messages, you had a system that could take pictures, you could actually start dealing with emails back and forth as this messaging systems, and all of that was in a mobile phone. Your personal data system, your calendar was in your mobile phone. And so we saw that was called smart technology. And we start seeing this smart technology is migrating everywhere. So in 1991 and 1995, we have these two guys from Palo Alto Research Center. So Mark Weisner was a chief technologist. John Seeley Brown was the CEO of PARC. And they created something called calm technology. And what they said is calm technology moves from the center, what's getting all the headlines, into the background. So it's no longer taking the main stage for attention. So for instance, do I get excited about a mobile phone? Only when I can't find mine, okay? Do I get excited about the features of the camera? No, I want to take a look at the content. What's my grandson doing? He's off in America, he sends me pictures and I find out about his life. I have another grandson who's just 2 years old. I found out he can kick a soccer ball with both feet now. So I see all of those discoveries, but it's calm technology. So ubiquitous computing names the third wave in computing. And that's just beginning in that period of time, 1993. What happened in 1993? 1993, the internet became open domain. And they said, now we are in this personal computing era. Each person and machine staring uneasily at each other's across the desktop. So in the office, the computers are staring at each other. Around the world, the computers in our company are staring at the computers in our suppliers' companies or in our customers' companies. Next comes ubiquitous computing, this age of calm technology, when technology recedes into the background of our lives. And now I can actually use my computer to turn on my car, get it warm on a cold winter morning. Or I could actually use my computer to communicate my house. I'm coming home, please turn the temperature up so that it's reasonably warmer when I get home. So the important waves of technology change are those that fundamentally alter the pace of technology in our lives. So what matters is not the technology itself, but what matters is its relationship to us, how it changes our way of doing things, our way of living. So Mark Weisner in this 1991 article said, machines that fit the human work environment, instead of forcing humans to enter theirs, will make using the computer as refreshing as a walk in the woods. I go back and I look at 1963, that very first computer. If I wanted to do something, I had to put a new tape on the machine to get a new operating program. If I wanted to put data in, I had to punch the data on a keyboard and put it onto a card and get the cards to make sure they would actually be read by the computer, feed them in. If I wanted to have a program, I had to punch it on the cards, make sure that job control language, all those cards had to be in the right order or it wouldn't work. So in the university, if we put our card deck in for studies at that point in time, we find out in the morning it didn't work. One of the cards had what they call a hanging piece of paper, a hanging Chad, that became famous in the presidential election between Gore and Bush. And so what we do is we learn by attaching new ideas to the existing context that's enabled our base of profound knowledge. So we start getting new ideas stimulated by this technology, and we get a new way of looking at it. Deming created this concept called profound knowledge. And we'll see the question is, what is truly profound in knowledge? And how do we grok it? How do we understand how it's going to be used with us? How will we enable ourselves to be able to apply that? And how will it change our way of living? So we're living in a disruptive age. The late Clayton Christensen, a faculty member at Harvard, wrote a number of books. So he talked about the innovator's dilemma, the innovative solution, the DNA of innovation. And he said the reason why it's so difficult for existing firms to capitalize on disruptive innovation. So disruptive innovation is something that totally changes the way our industry works, the way we do jobs. They said the reason is that the processes and the business model that made them good in the past. So in other words, what made us successful today actually makes us bad at competing in this disruption, and they don't carry us forward. You might have heard about the buggy whip, okay? So the buggy whip was actually a company that I ran across in Rochester, New York. Yes, they made buggy whips for the horse and carriage. But when the automobile came out, they actually made the transition to the new technology. They were experts in leather. And so they went from buggy whips to the leather seats on the car. And they finally went out of business in the early 1970s. And in the early 1970s, what happened was that the American cow leather was too expensive. And so they switched from American cow leather and they switched to cow leather that came from Portugal or South America. And they had an actor, Ricardo Montalban, talking about fine Corinthian leather, like it's from overseas. And his accent and everything made it seem something exotic, but it was actually much cheaper. And so what happened was that company that made the buggy whip transitioned through the technology, did not transition its supply chain. And they went out of business. They went bankrupt because they couldn't think far enough ahead. So they had gotten into an old way of thinking, buy American cows, use American products, and not to change the source of supply. So what we start seeing is disruptive ages can totally change our business. They totally change the way that we react and the way that customers react to us. So we're living in this age of digitalization. I've done a number of speeches on digitalization. In 2017, the very first ASQ conference in Europe was held in Berlin, and I gave the keynote address. And in there, I talked about this thing that was becoming called in Germany, Quality 4.0. So 2016 was the first time it was ever referred to. It's referred in Germany to talk about the digitalization of data in these robotic production systems and how that could be a closed loop production system to control quality of the production process. That was to them Quality 4.0. The head of quality at Mercedes-Benz later called that hygiene quality. Now, I took a look at that. To me, that wasn't what Quality 4.0 was at all, because that was actually getting embedded in the technology, not in how it actually affects us as human beings. And so digitalization has affected many technologies around us. It's given a significant shift in the way people work. And we see that the equipment that's used to increase productivity is using these smart system applications. So whether it's a smartphone, or maybe it's a smart house, or maybe it's a smart city, or a smart culture, all of those are saying we're connecting these applications together in a way that's fundamentally going to calm technology about how we work in the future. And what we see is that digitalization has enabled these distributed sensors to communicate better. They collect real-time data, they transmit it massively to internet storage systems that makes it accessible for multiple applications anywhere in the world. And then you can search through it and sort for hidden relationships, things we didn't see before. And what we're doing is basically the same thing we did with human minds in what we might call little data analysis, because we would do a fishbone diagram and we'd say, okay, what are all the rational subgroups? And we'd come up with the ones that we knew because we understood that system. What does big data do? It comes up and takes a look at a whole lot more and it says, what are the potential rational subgroups? These are things that cluster together. We used to call that association. Okay, so an affinity diagram was the same thing as rational subgrouping or big data analysis. It was looking for affinities or clusters, things that go together. So what digital systems are doing, it's enabling computing to perform tasks that 20 years ago only humans did. We thought only humans can form those associations, and they had to do it with Post-it notes. Okay, and it's been demonstrated that computers have passed human capability in several logical tests that are enabled by their self-learning. So you might remember Gary Karpov in the Russian chess master. In 1996, he played the computer Big Blue, and he won. He won 4 out of 6 matches, but the computer was actually able to beat him in some of the games. Interestingly enough, the next year, the computer won 4 out of 6. And so the computer was actually declared the winner. We saw the computer was actually able to beat Jeopardy masters, the best people playing in Jeopardy. It was able to beat Go. So Go players have 3.5 trillion possible moves. Now, the way Big Blue had won is they had won because they basically programmed every possible move available at every point in time with a change on the board. Now, you can't really do that. And so what you have to do is you have to learn about patterns in Go. And so what was happening there was it was actually playing a probability game. And so in the Go world, what we found was it was using things differently. It studied what the masters did in Go and created its own set of rules. And this was called deep learning. It was creating artificial networks. How do these ideas fit together? What are the rules? What are the probabilities in which they apply? And that computer was called DeepMind. DeepMind was sold to Google by IBM for $400 million. And that then became part of the Google system for how it actually does a lot of processing. Now that not everybody can afford the latest computing capability. And so we've discovered ways to share that on the cloud. So in the cloud, we see massive bases of servers. So lots of data is kept on servers. Also on servers are capabilities like the Deep Blue system. It's a server in the system. And if you have enough to pay for the access to it, you can actually use that type of computing on that network. And this is what's happened in digitalization. Massive uses of data, massive use of capabilities for processing are available. And we take a look at this, we start seeing that there's literally a plethora, a wide variety of digital technologies that are now available for application. However, not everyone is equally reliable, and not every one of the applications is really applicable to every one of the operational concerns we have. So this question that came up when we were talking about, if you will, this going back to the time of Adam Smith, and we said we have a market economy and there's market freedom, caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware of what they're buying. And so we see there's a number of different technologies that we have to become aware of. So there's artificial intelligence, machine learning, data filtering, neural networks, blockchain, adaptive feedback, remote monitoring, robotic control, document control. Now, all of those are things that can make a difference in how we apply quality in an organization. But the question is, in an organization, who will serve as the neutral arbitrator judging the value, appropriateness, and effectiveness of a proposed digital method? So how do we actually do that? Does the IT function, who supposedly understands that technology? Well, they don't understand all of it. They probably don't understand robotic control. They don't necessarily understand how do you use advanced digital filtering algorithms and so forth, but they can buy software. So they're used to doing that. So in many organizations, that organization comes to the top. Sometimes we have production engineering groups, and I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'm an industrial engineer. We populate those. And so what do we know about? We might know about digital systems. We might know about RFID chips and barcode readers and stuff. So we've used lots of different sensors and we're used to putting them in systems. So how does that all work together? So does that mean I can make the judgment because I'm an IE about how that applies everywhere? So the answer is no. And what we start seeing is we have to understand something about each of these technologies. So I want to just scratch the surface and for each of those technologies, introduce a technology to you. So if you've had no understanding of what they are, you can at least say, I sort of understand it. I may not grok it. I don't really have that depth understanding, but I can scratch the surface and I sort of know what it is and how they fit together. So the simplest definition, artificial intelligence is any computer-aided systems thinking that's doing what humans can do. Now, I remember in the early 1970s, we were going to the Secretary of the Navy and asking for acquisition money, not much, 5 million at that point in time. Well, you might think that's a lot of money, but the way the military spends money, it's not so much. But we wanted to go in and purchase some artificial intelligence capability. That was my job. It was a pattern recognition system, but we needed to have something different. We needed to have some capabilities that were not actually resident in the defense labs. I remember we went up to this Undersecretary of Acquisitions and he said, Commander Watson, why do you want to buy some artificial intelligence when we don't have enough of the real thing? And he didn't approve it. Well, I found out when he goes on vacation, so I put another time period slot when this man was on vacation. We came up again, and then we got our money. So AI is this kind of unusual field. The name itself is kind of scary. It sounds like the computer's taking over the world, like HAL in 2001, A Space Odyssey. And you talk to the computer, it tells you what to do. Well, does that seem so strange? Do any of you talk to your phone and say, Siri? Or you go home and you talk to your Amazon box and you say, I can't remember what her name is, but you know, there's a woman there who will set the music or the tone in the room and so forth. And we start seeing that agent technology has moved from the things where it's no longer so mysterious that it can be a part of our everyday life. I don't like to use those agents. I like to think clearly all on my own. but we start seeing it's no longer this thing that is strange to us. So what we start seeing is that we're getting this computer capability, robust data sets, more data than we ever knew what to do with. The internet, size of the internet is doubling every 2 years. So we're looking at growth of knowledge in petabytes. Now, I remember when I got my first 5 megabyte hard drive, and I was happy. You know, that magnetic technology was what was actually going on in the early 1980s. Now, we had 5.5-inch floppy disks that we would walk around with. You have to be very careful. Don't bend them or you'll lose your memory. But those were 250 kilobytes. And you start worrying about this. My first computer in the Navy, that was an airborne computer handling all the navigation, all these other things. It only had 64 kilobytes of memory total. And when we tried to fit our stuff in there, we couldn't. You know, all the things that we wanted to have for advanced algorithms. And we had to fight with things. They said, no, navigation is more important. It's safety of flight. Fuel planning, more important. It's safety of flight. Automatic pilot control, safety of flight. You can't have your cool stuff. And so what we started seeing is that we have to start having distributed computers. We have to have computers built into systems. And so AI is combining all of these fields. But we also see that it has subfields in it. So one is machine learning. How do we get those machines to learn for themselves? So they can observe patterns, so they recognize a pattern. They can go through and do pattern recognition. They can create a rule based on that pattern. And when they see the pattern happening, they can execute the rule. And that's basically what an AI system is doing. In 1973, 75, when we were doing it, we had to figure that out and we had to program it to do that. That's basically today called rudimentary or hard AI. Humans actually will controlling it and setting it. Machine learning, though, goes differently than that. So what the machine does, it recognizes those patterns and it starts setting up those rules. And then it can test the rule against, if you will, a learning system. So in a learning system, I maybe give it a school case and say, okay, test it against this. When you get the same solution, then you've learned. And we can start taking a look at this. So how we feed those solutions in. Maybe we'll have an expert conversing with it and saying, yeah, but you know, you could have made this decision a little better, and they can fine tune the model. But that's what's actually in machine learning. Deep learning is where we're doing this in a data set itself. So we're going to start seeing that all of these are part of this system. So artificial intelligence is the base. And what it does is it allows these advanced systems to develop more rapidly by mimicking what humans have done. It's basically learning based on the examples that are captured by monitoring real world data streams, observing the patterns that maybe we see or we don't see. So many of you who have worked in quality, you know what a control chart is, you know what the Western Electric rules are, that's pattern recognition. So when you have Minitab or some other software testing those rules, it gives you a special cause of variation. That is where we go through and we now have pattern recognition. So we have, first of all, detection of the unusual circumstance based on a magnitude of variation, and then we have a pattern that it's compared to. And that leads to an outcome. We say it's a special cause of variation. And those things then say that special cause of variation results in a loss of performance. And that means we need to do something about it, either reprocessing, rework, or something. And that's what intelligence is actually doing. It's replacing what the humans are being and making those kinds of decisions. Now, I briefly mentioned machine learning. So what we know about is it's a branch of artificial intelligence. It's using basic data to enable machines to learn how to perform tasks. And it's based, if you will, on self-instruction. So this machine learning is taking us to a point where it says, okay, what we've seen, the system is saying this, what I've seen is that I can actually predict what's happening. So it's like a recommendation system. If you've ever gone to a software site and you start seeing that I now have some interaction with it, like in Amazon, and you buy a book. The next time you come back, it says, you bought this in the past. Here's a recommendation. People who bought that book in the past have also bought these books. And I start finding out that, that's an interesting book. I need to look at it. And so it's telling me something to consider. And then many times I actually make the same choice. I shouldn't say that too loud. My wife is listening in the other room, and she wonders why so many books come to the house. So I say blame Amazon, blame their system. Now, Amazon started that program about learning in 1996. They began by training black belts, Lean Six Sigma black belts. What did they know? They then learned how to use data in systems. As those people developed over time, they actually learned how to actually program what we're doing into the system. And so now Amazon is probably, and Google, for instance, Facebook, they're all using artificial intelligence applications. And so they're actually creating things like software control systems, managing a self-driving car. So you take a look at Tesla and Elon Musk and what he's doing. That's an AI system. They say, we're having a problem. We had this mistake. We reprogram it. We reset the rules based on that. We learn, we don't repeat the same mistakes. We see virtual assistants doing automated functions. And so we have computer systems. And for this meeting, for instance, my computer told me, sign on 15 minutes, you'll be going online. Facial recognition systems. We can start seeing that many societies have cameras out there and they can actually identify who it is. I don't like that particularly. That feels a little intrusive in life. But we can also have email prediction applications used in selling. So if I send out a mass amount of emails, how many will I get back? Well, we can predict that based on people's performance to other emails. And so these machines are learning by self-observation. They recognize that there's a situation here, they become aware of it, they then analyze that and understand the pattern, and then they start teaching themselves, how can we apply that from this particular data set to others? So they're speeding up or accelerating the amount of choices we make and the kinds of choices. And so they may be actually instructed by humans on how to do that better. That's machine learning aided by expert systems. So we start seeing that all of these things are ingredients in this learning type of process. So the next type of thing is data filtering. So we have masses of data out there. So the data keeps growing. You know, and soon we're going to have zettabytes. I don't even remember how many zeros that is. But if you start thinking about petabytes is the level that we have human memory. Zettabytes is like 1 trillion times that. So as we start taking a look, what is happening is we have to find ways, how do we reduce the data, all that mass, to something that's meaningful? Well, what we do if we're in an organization, and I'm doing this manually, is I stratify the data by rational factors. I said, okay, show me the data for this demographic. Show me the data within these timestamps. And I start filtering it out. So that's what pivot tables will do. That's what autofilters do in Excel. But we can actually have the machines do this. So we can refine the way we organize and we can eliminate data that's been duplicated. It's redundant, repetitive. It's not relative. Maybe it's sensitive. It's private data. We don't want to look at it. So in healthcare applications, we take away, if you will, the name of the person, any indicator of who it was, so we can study what's actually happening in the healthcare treatments. So it'll parse data or divide it into relevant data and into rational subgroups that make us interesting. So that enables sorting according to importance for easier access and to conduct a query or an inquiry into what the data is doing. So we see that data can be edited or manipulated during this process. For instance, it's possible to filter data to eliminate noise or discover probability distributions that describe performance over time. So Deming described the difference between enumerative data and analytic data. Enumerative data is where we look at everything. And he made the comment, all we can find out from enumerative data is risk and probability. But we cannot get, because we don't have the time component, all the data is collected for the whole period of time, we can't get causality. If we want to find out causality, what came first, what influences whatever, we have to use analytic data. And analytic data is basically time-based data. So that's what a control chart does. An X bar R chart, we subgroup it, X bar S, it's a bigger subgroup, and then we have individual charts. Now the individual chart really came into use in 1993, and it's expanded greatly since then. Now Deming never saw that. He died in 1993. Kuru Ishikawa died in the 80s. He never saw an eye chart. And so what we start finding out is that much of what we've learned in the past doesn't even understand how we use control chart theory differently in a machine age that's data intensive, where we can have real world capturing of data in very high data rates.
which is totally different than what it was when we had to capture the data on pencil and paper. And so we start finding out we can now process probability distributions. We don't have to just take a look at raw data. And it's possible to apply tests for association, just like we did with those tests, the Western Electric tests, or take a look at clustering and discover affinities among data. And we can do all those things that gave us that statistical special cause variation and statistical process control, and the machines can do it themselves. That's a data filtering application. And if I start adding then variables together, so a control chart, it's only looking at one variable, isn't it? So I'm taking a look maybe at output over time. But I don't take a look at output and quality over time. I only look at output, then I maybe look at quality. If I start taking a look at 2 factors at a time, so maybe in a chemical process, I realize that controlling temperature and pressure conjointly is important. So instead of using standard control charts, I can use a hoteling control chart. But what we've done is we've changed temperature and pressure, 2 different scalar measurements, into probability functions. And so as temperature goes up and as pressure goes up, what's the probability of increasing your component? And that's not a linear function, it's a probability density function. And so that's what happens when we take 2 factors in. What happens if I take 7 factors in? So in the chemical factory that I was actually analyzing this afternoon, there's actually over 15 factors happening all at once. Now, how do I manage that? The answer is a Kalman filter. And now what we're doing is we're taking a look at signal to noise in every one of those individual measures, and we're converting that into a algorithm that actually has 3 characteristics. So first is it's sequential. So we realize that for every one of those measures, there is a state in which it exists. And each of those measures is an individual domain. We need to look at them together. How do they collectively form? And so we're going to be looking at those as combinations of signal to noise. And the only common ingredient we have is probability success. And so I take a look at the measures and their signal to noise ratio. I take a look at what is the desired probability distribution. And then I process the measures in there and I say, okay, what's the posterior probability distribution? And you might know, if you know a little bit about statistics, that's a language of Bayesian statistics. And when we do this recursively, we keep going back and looking at this. Pretty soon the input is a probability distribution and the output is a probability distribution. And now we're working in probability space and no longer in measurement space. Well, our control chart doesn't work there. So what do we have to do? Whole new algorithms. That's a Kalman filtering data algorithm. So in the world of Quality 4.0, there's an annual summit. It's happening in October. I'm actually giving a keynote speech, how we're going for what Schuhart called maximum control. Now, that was never achieved in his time. So Schuhart said, we have these belief systems, and then we have statistical process control. And in statistical process control, we have 2 levels. SPC that we do on control charts, and then we have maximum control. So maximum control occurs when we have the data rate moving so fast that we can actually take a look at very small increments. So that's the data historians capturing all this data in real time every 6 seconds or every 2 seconds. And we can start seeing in very small increments what is happening to the change. And we can process it as a differential equation, no longer as just a series of data points. And we can start understanding what's the slope of that line, how strong is it, what's the direction it's moving, what's the vector of the change of that group. And pretty soon what we have is what's called a Kalman filter. And so it's a totally new way of applying things. Now, statisticians have known about Kalman filters for a long time. It's not a new concept, created in 1960 by Rudolf Kalman. It was applied in engineering applications for deep sea mining. It was used in the Apollo mission to the moon, as that's how we're going to steer the Apollo module and keep the navigation system going into exactly this point where we want to land in Tranquility Base. We start seeing that it's used everywhere today, and it's used actually in many of the algorithms that are happening on the internet today. But we don't know about it. But we haven't actually rocked the understanding, if you will, so it affects us. What Kalman filtering is, we're still dealing with statistical process control. Another technology on the list, neural networks. So these operate like the nodes and synapses of the brain in the nervous system. What they really are, it's an algorithm that's capable to recognize underlying relationships in data. And so what we do is they search the input nodes and they adapt to changing inputs in a way that results in delivering the best possible outcome without needing to change any of the output performance criteria. Well, what's happening here? So in the brain, we start seeing multiple channels going into a synapse. And each of those channels has a way of changing the status in the synapse. So the synapse is making a decision about something. It's actually changing its state based on the incoming data. And then it signals the output. It communicates to many different places. And so just to communicate using my hands, for instance, the brain has to move multiple signals. Because I'm not just moving one finger, I'm moving a whole hand, a arm, all the fingers together. And there are multiple signals happening because I made a conscious or unconscious decision to talk. So if I'm moving my hands a lot, maybe it's probably unconscious. So we start seeing an artificial neural network, because compared to a human one, is a subset of machine learning. And what it's doing is enabling what we call deep learning algorithms. So the system is learning the parameters and how do I use them over and over again. This is recursive. So we had Bayesian applications, we have recursive applications. We keep learning from ourselves by redoing it over and over again. So it's using these learnable parameters to integrate across process inputs that's originating from all those different nodes. It's calculating losses, signal to noise ratio, and then it's telling us this is how we can actually filter out those error, if you will, observations. And if an AI, an artificial neural network is trained on known data, it's calculated from a forward pass. So on the one pass, it uses the forward pass, say, here it is. And then it uses a backward pass to calculate the error function. So the forward pass is saying, that's the way the system goes. Next time around, I calculate the error and I can correct it. So what we see is that these filtering systems running with neural networks can actually correct the system and the languages we lock on to the true signal. Now, unless you think that's strange, that's how noise filtering in a headset works. So we're locking on, we're doing signal to noise pressure, we're suppressing the noise and enhancing the signal. So we're processing signal to noise ratios. So today we process data, if you will, in control charts. Tomorrow we'll process signal to noise ratios and we'll do them in filtered systems. And they'll be working on artificial neural networks for how the systems come together using this type of capability. Now, another capability that's in this list is called blockchain. So this was first described in 1991. So compared to some of these others, it's relatively new. And what it's doing is it's using double timestamps that prevent tampering. So it's relatively secure compared to other systems. So what it is, it's a database and it stores information in blocks, okay? So chunks, and they're chained together because they have a chronological sequence based on the arrival time of the data. So if we take a look at that individual control chart, the data coming in, that's based on arrival of the data at whatever the perception sensor is. So as new information comes in, it's stored in a new block. Now that can be located decentralized in a server anywhere, but the time history, and then there is a cross-checking, it's called a hash. So that's the encryption within there that connects it to the next block. And because those things cannot be changed in there, we can start storing this in linear chronological order because that timestamp is used to chunk those blocks and it becomes uniquely recognizable by the timestamp and this cryptographic code, the hash that's mathematically put in there. And that identifies it as well as the block where it came from and the one where it's going to. So we start seeing this arrival time and this hash is part of a security system. This is one reason why it's being used for things like Bitcoin today. And it's being looked at for financial transactions. Or we're looking at this for how do we manage supply chains differently? So how do I track, like at Amazon, a book that I ordered to me? Well, there's a whole sequence of activities. How do I know where it is? And it's interesting. I have 2 books that are not delivered to me that should have been a long time ago. And the reason that I don't know where they are, and I can't track them in the system, is they weren't shipped by Amazon. They were shipped by a small booking supplier who's actually handling this for Amazon. And they are not in that AI network. So Amazon literally has to go do an awful lot more work to get those books and their tracking known to me so I know where they are and when they're going to be delivered. Now, we also see there's another technology, and it's called adaptive feedback. Now, feedback is not new. When we take a look at this, we saw Wisner talking about cybernetic systems in the 1940s, and a cybernetic system is one that has feedback in it. So you have an organism response and a feedback that says, would like to correct it. So we can have two types of feedback systems, a fixed control system. So we have a set of reference data that's saying, are you actually doing what we want you to do? And we've programmed this into many things that are in production for a long time. So if I go a check, is this within control limits? That's a fixed control feedback system. Now, the difference with an adaptive one is that we're not resynchronizing the process based on a fixed state, but we're trying to understand, so that's deterministic. We're trying to understand a probabilistic system. So here we see the relationship between the error and control is not fixed. It's not one time, we don't set it, but it varies according to how the variables in the system are changing. So in this neural network, for instance, we get adaptive feedback and we say, the system is actually changing. And because it's changing over time, we have to set different thresholds. And so this type of controller is a probabilistic controller. So it's actually suitable for an advanced application in artificial intelligence. So that feedback loop, what's it good for? Well, if I'm in Kone, which is a Finnish company that makes elevators. So as we start taking a look at this, we talked about this adaptive control. Remote monitoring is what happens at the same time, okay? Robotic control is now we're going to control a device, and this is the Internet of Things. I'm going to ask a robot to do something. So my wife has a robot that cleans the house. So she calls it Phil. That's because my daughter has the same robot. She calls it Robbie. So we've humanized this, right? We've actually made this a part of that calm technology that comes into our lives. We can automate document control. Systems can actually go and create documents about how to do processes. And that's because they've learned using something called natural language processing. And in this Internet of Things, we see everything is connected to everything else. And this is the next evolution. Well, that evolution actually started around 2011. The digital technology was completed in 2008. So in this Internet of Things, what we start seeing is everything's connected to everything else. So why did it move so quickly? Well, there's a whole bunch of things. I'll let you read that themselves. And what happened in the last 5 years, so Gartner Group has said, the world of these internet devices in 2015, it was 4.9 billion things connected to that internet. In 2020, it grew exponentially to 25 billion. So there are more things connected to the internet than there are people connected. And we start seeing there's different tiers. So platforms that are connected to the internet devices. Then there's edge computing, which acts as a gateway. So for instance, a gateway might be a smart house or a smart city. And then there's the cloud sitting out there, which is someplace in Ethernet, but there we can get access to data storage, software as a cloud by, for instance, something like Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure. So we start seeing this Internet of Things senses things differently. It's going to communicate differently. It's going to change the lifestyle. So technology is more than about communication, but it may facilitate we communicate. However, it does not help us know what we should say. And that's the main point. So there is a need for a community of practice. This is people coming together. This was actually seen in the 1990s. And we start seeing that these communities of practice share best practices, and that's what we're doing here. We're talking about what is that best practice to come. So we can start seeing there's different data benefits we have. So digital systems allow certain things, and they have different desired systems benefits would like to get out of it. So what is this buzzword quality 4.0? It came about because the Germans said, we can do quality differently, but we didn't accept that. So quality 4.0, this last June, we had the IAQ, the International Academy of Quality, made a statement that says, quality 4.0 is an era, a period of time of exceptional disruption to the practice of quality management in all dimensions of application. And it's expanding global challenges, shifting organizational priorities, rapidly expanding technologies, and they're driving an acceleration of changes. And those accelerated changes were already accelerating. So now we've accelerated acceleration. And so that's like the second derivative. So we also see that the Chartered Quality Institute in the UK
did a study. And so I made an addition in here, but they said quality 4.0 in their definition. I said it's an era or a time period of disruption, which is characterized by leveraging technology with people to improve the quality of the organization, product, services, and the outcomes it creates. And with Dr. Saudiva in Portugal, we wrote a paper on how macro quality emerges from quality 4.0. And what we're going to see is this isn't the end. We're going to change from a micro quality environment that's quality within the company to now we're going to accelerate it because we've connected across the world. So I'm working in the Climate Leadership Coalition in Finland. So it's the leading executives in Finland. They are actually changing how Europe is doing business about artificial intelligence and about climate connectivity and about how we measure these things. And so what we see is in macroeconomic, we're going to have a persistent pursuit of goodness coupled with the avoidance of badness for the benefit of humanity, for everyone. And that changes the way we measure things. And it's also for the benefit of the biosphere. So there are grand challenges that we have in this report on this statement of quality 4.0 that came from the Academy. And I'd encourage the Palestine, the Pakistani Institute of Quality at the PIQC to consider endorsing that, putting it up on your website, even translating into local languages so people can understand what we mean in terms of this manifesto of quality for the future. And there were different principles about that. And what we see is that step by step, we walk the 1,000-mile road. We keep changing. And engineers, industrial engineers, quality professionals are by nature astute observers of systems. We're also purveyors of profound knowledge based on measurement. So these technologies, this area should be something that we welcome. And we see that in productive systems, we're talking about having a digital twin. So production system is hardware, software, it's a human system. It's a management information system. It's the data, but it's also the culture in which we work. So how do all of those things work together? And we can start seeing there are many reasons for flows. Now, I can tell right now I'm not going to get through this very quickly. And so I'm being controlled a little bit by the clock. And so profound knowledge. And again, you can all get copies of this. It's based on what Deming said. Now, Deming didn't get it right. Okay. He wrote it in 1992 as a first draft. He never operationally defined it. He didn't really give us any sense of what's in this. So he actually never told us how do we treat this as a hypothesis testing of profound knowledge. So what is or is not profound knowledge and so forth. And that's what I did in my doctoral dissertation. So I said, here's the theory and practice of profound knowledge and expanded upon that. And what we start seeing is digitalization is affecting quality. Now at HP in the 1960s or 70s, 70s and 80s, as we started going into digitalization, we realized there's a process that each time we go through, we have to standardize work. So we turn an SDCA cycle. The first time we go there, we understand. So when you go to the Gemba, go to understand. The second time, go to check, is my understanding right? And now let's document it. The third time is, now that I've documented, let's go back and look at it again, and let's figure out where's the waste? What can we do to eliminate the losses? And when we've done that, now we're ready to optimize or automate the system. So don't optimize or automate the things that are already creating waste in the system. That does us no value. So as we take a look at this moving into the future, we have to standardize our system, we have to improve the system, and then we can transform it through automation. Now I'm going to just skip over these slides, but this describes those 4 steps. And what we start seeing is that engineers and industrial engineers are basically able to work on this because we're uniquely qualified. This is what we think about. This is the way we go. We elevate quality thinking from constraints in operational activities to understanding how it is actually a generic strategy for continuing improvement in an organization and how it can move forward when we're dealing with everybody. So how does our knowledge become profound? Well, we go through our educational process. We start with a general model. Then we get a mental model of averages. That's what happens in undergraduate school. In university graduate, we start getting specific mental models. And as we come out of there, I understand special causes of the model in a particular field. When we start practicing, we go through 3 levels of improvement. The first level, journeyman, we get a practical use or pragmatic use of those special models. In Japan, that's called shu. So shu is I can actually do the practice that's in that special cause system without any support. I've got it on my own. The craftsman level, I become the change manager for efficient procedures. Now I understand how do I manage those other control systems happening in. So all the data that's changing, I know what to do with it. At the master level, I can design a new process. So in Japanese systems, there's 3 levels of training that you get to before you become a master. Shu, ha, and then ri. And before that, you're actually getting to the point where you just understand the basics. So for us, that's like a black belt level of performance. And then we have to go and do it, learn practically. And so I use this filter from Miyamoto Musashi in his book of 5 rings. He said, perception is strong, sight is weak. In strategy, it's important to see distant things as if they were close and take a distance view of close things. And so what I see is there's 2 foundations here. The distant view. So the distant view, I can have an object up close. And when I take a distance view of a close object, what I see is how it fits into context. If I take a distance view of a distance object, I can't see it. It's out of focus. So what I have to do is understand what's happening there. When I'm taking a look at a close view, if I take a close view of a distance things, I start understanding what will be those things that affect us in the future. If I take a close view of a close view, that's the management, micromanagement, if you will, management myopia. I'm starting to tell you all these detailed things without understanding where is it going? What type of job do we have? How do we do these things in the future? So here's my question to you. How you plan your future? What direction do you see your career evolving towards? Is it going to be a technology focus, a software development focus, maybe a management systems focus? How well are you prepared currently in that direction and moving in that direction? So do you understand the basics of the software methods, the advanced technologies or advanced statistics of data science? Do you understand how the variety in smart systems technology can be used to create new productive systems? So what I want to leave you with is a takeaway. And the takeaway is going to be, thank you for attention, questions, hang on. That's me, forget about that. 2 things here. I have a website, go take a look at it. I've got about 18 webinars that you can go take a look at, 18 hours of discussion, all free. I've got 15 papers downloadable, 25 ebooks downloadable, all free. Go to my LinkedIn session. If you want to join me, please do. Just send me an invitation. I accept everybody if they're from generally the quality industrial engineering or reliability engineering communities and so forth. But here's the takeaway. It's a technology self-assessment. So what you'll see as you start getting to the end of this is, here's now the details of all of those technologies that we start seeing. So detection, data capture, data transmission, data recording and storage, data sorting and processing, data modeling, data application. How do we deal with those things? They build situational awareness, what's happening in the system, and sense making. And then at the end, there's a quiz for each one of those that goes through those things, and it asks you for you to self-evaluate yourself. So you see yourself moving in some areas. How well do you really understand that situation in which you're working? So I'm going to come out of this presentation now and stop sharing this. So I'm going to then come back and ask you all basically if there are some questions that exist.
I thank you on behalf of all the guests and PIQC members. It was a wonderful presentation. There are some questions in the chat box. Some participants wants to know about the effect of artificial intelligence in the educational sector, and this is Mr. Muhammad Ayaz. Effect of artificial intelligence in the education sector.
Okay, well, there's lots of ways that it can affect education. So one of those is I want to make sure I'm not. I'm just sharing my video now, right? Not the PowerPoint's okay. So one of the things is that it can actually tell us what we need to learn. So you can have an AI system today that actually tell you where the holes are in your knowledge. So it could actually, give you this interrogation process like a mentor would. And so I see automated mentoring systems in the future in terms of intelligence, maybe even guiding you into courses that are in an AI database that's sortable. And so, for instance, if you take a look at where is MIT going in its, so they have the Media Lab and they've got all of these things on Coursera and stuff. And so the question will be is how are they going to use that in the future? And as we start taking a look, we'll start seeing that education, by and large, will become that automated system. So for instance, on my website, I have 18 webinars as a series on managing for quality. And I built that up step by step. I have another, so far, 4 of them or 3 of them on lean systems that are there. 3 more will be posted by the end of next week. And so we'll see there's a whole course on lean available and so forth. So all of that stuff is going in public domain. Why? Because I believe that that's what we should do. I've had in public domain, I've had a Greenbelt course available for downloading for anybody who wants to have it since 2017. And so there's 80 videos in that system that you can go and access. And you find them under ESTIEM, ESTIEM, which is the European Students of Industrial Engineering and Management. So that course is delivered all over, and I believe the students in Lahore, Pakistan have an ESTIEM branch, and they can actually go through that website and find that program. And you can develop student instructors in that program. So I'm no longer teaching that, but I've turned it over to students. So many of those things will create changes in education.
Great. Doctor, another question is about the effect of artificial intelligence on the supply chain of whether it is the manufacturing side or it is the service side.
Well, actually, I'm working with one company here. It's the Swedish postal system called PostNord. They have 250,000 employees. And as you start taking a look at distribution logistics, for instance, that's what Amazon's doing. Everything is an AI system. And so they understand all of those applications. They start learning about buildings. How do I get into a building? In Finland, you have to have a security code. And the AI system starts learning about all those things. Many people don't like this because they say, wait a minute, it's learning too much about me. So when people hack into that system, they can actually maybe even get into your house or get right to your door anyhow. And so maybe that's gone too far. So I don't know the answer to that. That's a social system. But this last April in Europe, the European Union passed a law called Responsible AI. And it's basically about there are limits to how far AI can go by law. And so that they're trying to put some controls on how artificial intelligence can actually get engaged in our lives. And so I think that's an interesting question or approach that's going to get into it. But basically, we can do it in manufacturing, we can do it in service environment. So AI is a very viable technology for both.
Okay, thank you. The question I asked was about Mr. Zulfikar Ali. Doctor, another question is the quality professionals are not well aware of technologies of the smart machines. So what do you think how the professionals can overcome or update themselves for the coming era?
Well, I'm heading up as a member of the International Academy for Quality. I've been the past president. I'm an honorary member, and right now I'm heading up a think tank called Quality 4.0. And in 2 weeks, I'm having a meeting with about 20 members of that think tank, and I've identified a series of webinars that I would like for us to publish and make them freely available. Just like I've done these ones that I've posted on LinkedIn, I would like to see a dozen or so webinars on the basics of this. And each of those webinars pointing you to where you go for more knowledge. So I'm doing a basic webinar in this ASQ on basically maximum quality to Kalman filtering applications and beyond in quantum computing. That's actually a new capability, and it just became real this year. So we now have quantum operating systems, we have quantum chips, and that's going to change everything. That goes one step beyond what you do in Kalman filtering. And so people just aren't aware of this. And I've lived my whole life in this technology world. And actually, as you can probably tell from this thing, I get a little bit too involved in talking about it sometimes. But I think what we can actually do is take each of those technologies that I mentioned today and turn it into a webinar that gives the basics for people. And so my interest is, can we actually do that, get good quality webinars out there, make them available free to the global quality community and anybody else who wants to learn about it. So it's not going to be, it's a pro bono thing. It's not going to be for cost. So that's going to be another thing that can happen in the system. I think if everybody tries to do it themselves, it'll take too much time.
Yes, thank you. It means the main answer to the question is that everyone can select the relevant webinars to update their knowledge and get them trained for the coming challenges.
Yeah, I think
it is for everyone. Yes.
That will give you the starting point, but it's not going to be enough to actually go do it. But so one of the things in every one of those webinars, one of the requirements is, and what's your next step if that's what you want to learn about? And so there are many other next steps in every one of those technologies.
Okay, thank you. It is for everyone that if someone wants to ask a question, they can write their question in the chat box. Gregory, you are dealing with different Asian countries, and there is a question again that how do you see the transition of this quality 4.0 in the developing countries?
Well, actually, it's interesting because I've spent a lot of time in Africa. I spent 3 years working in Africa on quality in 5 nations there. And I spent a lot of time, I still am coaching the students who are going out to an additional 8 nations with basic quality improvement programs that I help create for them to take out there. So it's not just this Greenbelt program, it's basic quality professional studies. And what I see is if I go to developing nations, most of the industry tends to be about basic things in life. And I don't need artificial intelligence, for instance, to be able to do agriculture. Okay, so many of those things will actually apply, if you will, in terms of how I do things. Now, some things will require AI. And so I'm talking to the International Trade Center. How do they go through their global quality platform? How do they make AI accessible tools that would be enabling things like transportation knowledge of laws for shipping to different countries and so forth? I mean, the mass of laws that a small business has to go through to ship to a developed nation, it's phenomenal. It's actually a barrier. And in many of those countries, if you ship from a developed nation to, I mean, from an undeveloped nation to developed nation, if they do a test on the product and it doesn't pass, then they then bill you for the cost of the test. Then they ship the product back, or they bill you for the cost of disposal of it and so forth. And that's enough. It's in their money. It's in their environment. That's enough to bankrupt some of these small companies. So we really have to make sure, do we get the right information in the right people's hands? That's an AI capability that can actually be done today.
So another question is from Imanzi. He wants to ask what is the difference between the quality 4.0 and the integrated quality management systems?
Okay, okay, I hate integrated quality management systems, okay? I hate ISO. I hate ISO 9000, 14000, all of those. So that's my bias. I'll get that off the table first. Number one is those systems do not automate anything, okay? You are actually working on an old quality paradigm that will no longer work. I can obsolete ISO 9000 with a good automated quality management documentation system, and it will happen in the next 5 years. And so one of the things we have to see is if you have your career just based on ISO 9000 or those types of systems, they will not exist for long in the future. There's some funny things. If you take a look at the United States, the number of ISO 9000 registered organizations has cut in half. Why? Because there's no value in it to management. And the only reason that it's valuable in a developing country is the developed countries say you have to have the piece of paper. And that's not enough to say you're getting value out of it in your own company. So what I see is in the future, we will have automated documentation management systems, automated writing, if you will, of standard work procedures and so forth, because the systems can be made smart enough to do that. And if I take a look in large companies, so if I take a look in a company, say the size of Tata, I know that's not in Pakistan, but a size of that, they can afford those types of systems. They could afford giving that type of support to their supply chains. And the way information processing is moving so fast, the acceleration of acceleration. So in the first 6 months of COVID in 2020, between December and June, there's a McKinsey study, and what we saw was there was an acceleration of threefold interest on internet connectivity and AI applications. And that was just the first 6 months of COVID. And it's continued to accelerate. I just don't have new data, but we keep seeing accelerating and accelerating. And so more and more people are saying, what can we do remotely? How can we manage that remotely? And so going to do things, people are now doing remote audits for ISO 9000. It's going to become more remote. And we'll start seeing that's an area of vulnerability in the quality community. So if that's your job, think about finding something to broaden yourself, because in 5 to 10 years, those jobs will no longer exist. Just like quality inspection jobs will no longer exist. And you have to get ready for it now. That's the sense of urgency.
Good. Thank you, Doctor. There are some other questions as well, but we are running short of time. Doctor, I will thank you again, and I will hand over to Dr. Kamran Musa. Dr. Sir, are you available?
Yes, I'm available. Gregory, first of all, thank you very much for this exciting session we had today. I'm sure we all have learned a lot, even at PIQC and also with all our professionals who are joining this session. You have introduced and gone beautifully on the evolution of technology, especially. And I think one of the main points you have raised is the rapidly changing technology. In our country, for example, a lot of industries now for the last 2-3 years have switched and developed some form of artificial intelligence and also Industry 4.0. They are working on Industry 4.0. For example, in stores, automated vehicles in stores, automatic supply chains and these things. In some hospital, there are augmented realities, they are doing the operation. Doctor is sitting somewhere in another country doing the operation here. We are seeing these now over the last 2-3 years, The problem is now with the, very rightly you said about the role of the quality managers, the quality professionals. They are not tuned to all these technologies. Earlier, that was the domain of the IT people, and now with the new technologies, the IT domain has to be integrated with the quality people. So the future, as you rightly said, you talked about the artificial intelligence, machine learning, data filtering, neural networks. So how, like you just said, that there will be no jobs for the inspectors or for the testing people. Of course, in developing countries, we will a little later come to this thing, but you have to face that thing earlier in the developed country, But nonetheless, these things, the transformation, the automation of testing, the automation of, or the developing the algorithms, for testing and learning from the outcomes of the production is the new reality that we have to, as quality professionals, go into it. We have to now design systems, automated systems, IT-based systems, algorithms who can take care of testing and also the quality assurance aspect of organizations. And I think, secondly, I'm very happy to see your generosity in sharing knowledge. You have mentioned so many things. Somebody has mentioned that the slides, there are some black spot on the slides, which I don't know why. But you have sent us the, as you earlier said, your slides. So we will be sending to all the participants, the slides of the Dr. Gregory Watson, so that you will not have any problem. And really, it's a wonderful thing to see the global work that you have done. You've been sharing, you've been leading in the Quality 4.0 and building or creating rather, the knowledge domain which will fit in the coming era, And we all have to learn. And I'm also pleased to mention here a number of leading quality professionals are already working on this domain and looking into ways and means to integrate the changing needs. Of course, the rate of change in developed countries is a little different from the rate of change in our country. Like I said, some industrial use, some medical use. Somebody asked about the educational use. There are so many labs now working again also on the augmented realities, just artificially, they just wear all this augmented reality and they work in the labs, in the chemical labs and all that, in engineering or medicine, and all these things can be done. But the big problem is the cost. the cost of technology is far higher than the cost of manpower in our countries. And therefore, our model of transition and our timeline of transition may not be as rapid as you have just mentioned,
Yeah, and let me just make a comment to this, Kamran. I'm giving a presentation at the 50th anniversary of Sandholm Associates in Sweden, and I'm actually going to present a case study of automation of injection molding equipment in a small business. And there they had all the capability to connect everything electronically, but over 75% of the benefit came by the lean solutions first. So this UDSO model, you can do that before you automate. And what we start finding out in many of those solutions, particularly small businesses, before you actually invest in the automation, you can get lots of benefit by preparing for the automation. And that's the tradition, the things that we've learned about, the things that we used in the past. And that preparation gives you this advice on how we move far ahead. So don't just buy the automation. That's the thing. Figure out what should we use? What should we automate? How do we put it in there? And you can apply lean, you can apply statistics and so forth to build a better system. So that's, as you said, it's about getting into the design of how we do those productive systems. And that's actually, I think, the realm that quality professionals will actually have an enduring place in organizations.
Yeah, and this internet, is actually revolutionizing. Like you mentioned about the Amazon, we have growing businesses in Pakistan also, like the Ras PK is coming up, with it's a similar small level activity, but they will be, they are gradually, we are seeing going into the services and automation and getting the feedbacks and using artificial intelligence, for their marketing, artificial intelligence for their other step. Also like Google Map, we are using a lot, and now this is used by so many logistic companies are using and integrating with their own systems. Like cement distributors are using on distribution trucks and all that. So there is little, but all those companies who are using are who are financially well off and so forth and can invest much. But then the ultimate aim, I very much agree with you, is to provide cheaper product, like from the lean. It all at the end should provide in a lesser cost to the customer. This technology should facilitate rather than increasing the cost, it should decrease the cost. And that we have seen like in the use of this online trainings and education, we are seeing that the cost of education is going a little down. And so forth, we see also the cost of services will go also down and so forth. So it was really lovely, and we'll definitely use your knowledge bank, which you have just given us, signed checks of all those knowledge banks that you have given, we really appreciate and we really, and acknowledge your efforts, in the field of quality. We will definitely remember you. We will use your knowledge. We will also take guidance from you in the coming years, and I'm sure like in International Academy for Quality, you are putting a lot of role there. I'm in one of their, education think tank, and there they also they are looking at you on integrating some of the quality aspect with the education there. And we discuss all these things in the think tank also. So I like to thank you once again on behalf of all the participants. Today we had participants not only from Pakistan, but many other countries, like Jamaica and USA and Canada and Saudi Arabia also, and maybe some other countries. So I like to thank all the participants. We are really sorry due to shortage of time. We cannot extend so much because so many people want to leave also. But next time you can have your contact directly with Dr. Gregory Watson also. Some people also wanted to invite you. They can be in contact with you directly. We'll be sending your contacts and so forth. So thank you very much, Gregory Watson, and we hope to see you hopefully in some new venture next time.
Thank you, Kamran. It's always good to see you again. I still remember our first meeting, which I think was over 15 years ago, if I recall properly. And we met in Tehran, I believe.